common enemy.
I want to make sure I've given enough advice to someone who is currently dealing with a
Mm-hmm.
narcissist. All of the things that you've said to them
Mm-hmm.
ring true.
Mm-hmm.
They can relate to everything you've said. Are you telling them to get out of that
Mm-mm.
situation?
No. And it's something that's very, very important to me is that people don't feel compelled that they have to get out because they can't always get out. And I think if we put that forth as the only pathway, then people who can't get out might say, "That now what? I'm just supposed to sit here and suffer?" And the answer to that's no. In my book, what I talk about is this idea: if you're gonna stay in a relationship like this, right, for whatever reason, it could be a family member, and you still don't want to fully walk away from your family of origin. It could be a long-term marriage, and you've got minor children, or there's financial or cultural reasons. It might be a job you've had for a long time, and you're not financially in a position to step away from it. It might be a friend you've had a long time. Your reasons are yours. And so I always say to people, you must never feel pressure unless it's dangerous. Let's take dangerousness out of the equation, right? You don't feel compelled to do what people say. It's going to be harder. If you stay, it is going to be harder because you're still being exposed to their manipulative, invalidating, unkind, unsettling, destabilizing behavior. However, the first step, the key step, is what I call radical acceptance. This is not going to change. This is it. There is going to be no someday better. It's not going to get better when he gets a promotion. It's not going to get better for her when the kids grow up. Your mom's not going to soften with age. This is it, folks. You now know what this looks like. It is not going to change substantially. Their behavior is not going to change substantially. So if you're going to stay in it, your workarounds are going to be based on knowing that you have to have very realistic expectations. Now, what happens though is when people initially have this level of radical acceptance, they have a tremendous amount of grief because a lot of hope was keeping them going. I thought it was going to get better someday. I thought maybe that someday would come. The staying means that someday is not going to come. And so that means that you're not as, once you radically accept, you're not as surprised by their behavior because a lot of people get exhausted from the number of times over years or decades. They're like, I can't believe they did that. I can't believe they did. I'm like, can we just stop that part and say, of course you believe they did it. In fact, we could have set a clock by the idea that they would have done it, by the fact they would have done it. That's a big piece of this. But the grief of letting go of what you wanted these things to be, that's its own process, and grief takes time. But, as you come around through that, as you come around the bend on that, and you really do radically accept, you need some tools. And probably the biggest tool of all is social connection with people who are healthy, empathic, attuned, responsive, compassionate, and respectful. Whether that means you might have friends who already are this for you. It might be enhanced by getting into therapy. You might join a support group. You might meet friends at work. There's many ways you might try to do this, but you're going to need it. Because if you're going to stay, you're going to need spaces where you're not gaslighted. You're going to need spaces where you are seen, where you are valued, where you are cherished. That becomes the pathway to surviving. And then it doesn't feel good to feel like you're in a marriage where you're phoning it in for the rest of your life. But, people say that now that I'm not as surprised by their behavior, it's a little more bearable. I've constructed a rich life almost around this marriage. And I just sort of, view that as sort of the kind of annoyance at the side of the room that it is. Some people say, I happen to adore my sister, but I can't stand my narcissistic parent. And, but I'm going to stay in touch with them so I can also have the family gatherings that matter to my sister. But I no longer have conversations with my mother. Or one person I know said she would regularly visit a narcissistic father because nobody else would give him the time of day, and he needed a little bit of assistance. She said, I'd set a timer, 90 minutes max. Once the 90 minutes rang out, I'd say, whoop, I got to jump. He'd always yell at her. She said, but better to yell at 90 minutes than at 3 hours. Either way, he was going to yell. So people get into this space of accepting what this is and its limitations. Some people over time may still decide to leave, but not at that moment. But staying and not radically accepting it will destroy you.